Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ancient Warfare Answers. I'm Murray Dahm. I am the assistant editor of Ancient Warfare magazine, and I am answering a question that came through on email from Jörn Schneider today. You too can send us an email and ask a question, or of course, you can become a patron on Patreon and support the podcast, Ancient Warfare. Patreon.com/Ancient Warfare Podcast. You can do that. Now, the question is a biggie. So this is Murray's take on this one. There are any number of other takes that you could give on this question. And the question is, what mattered most in ancient warfare? Well, golly jeepers. So if I'm only allowed one, I think I have to say it's men. Men mattered most. What men did, who was present, who was there, their experience or inexperience, their camaraderie or lack of camaraderie, their leadership, their relationships to one another, not necessarily their technology, not their weaponry, not their, to some extent it has to be their armor, because, they have to be relatively impregnable to what's coming. But to me, it's the thing that stands out throughout ancient warfare from pre-biblical times through to the late Roman Empire, is that the men who are able to achieve sometimes unexpected and remarkable victories do so through the confidence in themselves and the confidence they inspire in their men. Yes, there are tactical innovations. Yes, there are weapon developments. But I think the interesting thing about a lot of what's going on is it's the confidence that the men have in themselves that allows them to achieve those remarkable victories. Often, of course, we now analyze tactical innovation or the superiority of the Greek hoplite to the Persian warrior, for instance. But at the time, those superiorities were not recognized. They were not expected. The Persian Empire, for instance, when they landed at Marathon, they had been expanding in all directions and were not expected to lose to a Greek city, the militia of a Greek city. And so it's the confidence of the Athenians and the Plataeans in themselves and in, their military craft that allowed them to run at the Persians, which no one had ever done before. That's something Herodotus tells us, and win. Now we go, oh well, it's because the bronze and armor of a hoplite is superior to that of a Persian. That hadn't been something that any enemy against the Persians had thought of up to that point. And the numbers that we get in the Persian invasions later, a decade later, at leading up to Thermopylae, Salamis, and Plataea, famously Herodotus tells us it's 5 million men. Now it's been pointed out, of course, that if it was 5 million men, then the last man would still be in Sardis when the first man gets to Thermopylae. So it's clearly not 5 million men, and most modern estimates bring that down to 200,000. That's still a lot of men. Some bring it down even lower. And again, the expectation from the world, if they'd known about it, would have been that vast army would defeat the Greeks, who couldn't muster that amount of men, even with the entire muster of all the Greek city-states willing to fight. They weren't going to be able to get those numbers. And so it was confidence rather than tactics that won, I think. And I mean, the Battle of Plataea, the tactics are an absolute shambles, so it certainly wasn't tactics. When you look at the Greek retreat from the Battle of Cunaxa, where, according to Xenophon, they hadn't lost a man, and they retreat from enemy territory. They don't surrender. They don't offer their services to the Persians. They have confidence in themselves to be able to get out to march to the sea, and they do. So to me, it's the confidence that the men have in themselves being able to do it. Lots of examples of that, and overcoming great odds and winning where you were expected to lose. On the other side of that, of course, you've got hubris and arrogance that there are lots of examples of people expecting to win who don't. And I think that's another aspect of the same, well, the other side of the same coin, that often you have overconfidence or wrongly placed confidence. And we see the destruction of several Roman armies where that kind of hubris is in place. And if you'd had a different commander in that situation, probably wouldn't have had the same outcome. You know, if Crassus hadn't have marched off to Carrhae and had followed advice and, you know, let cooler heads prevail, we probably wouldn't have had that disaster. Valens at the Battle of Adrianople could have waited for his nephew Gratian to arrive with the Western Roman army, and then, you know, the numbers against the Goths would have been evened up. But he was impatient to fight them on his own. According to the sources, Belisarius invades the Vandal North Africa with an army of 15,000 men, and supposedly he's fighting a Vandal army of 80,000 men, and the 80,000 men have him surrounded and they still lose. So is that down to their hubris, or is it down to Belisarius's confidence? It's hard to know in that case. But I think that's, to me, that's the thing that comes through again and again, is the qualities of the individuals, whether it be the commanders or the soldiers under them, are the thing that seems to win through against all odds. If I was going to be devil's advocate, I might say the weather would be what matters most. That could really mess with people's thinking on that question. But no, I'm going to go with my original answer. You know, unfortunately, it's not $1 million question, and there's no one sitting in a seat offering me that kind of money. But yes, I think that it's the men, and I think that the confidence, the rightly placed confidence of men throughout military history is what makes military history of the ancient world so fascinating, endlessly fascinating, to see how they overcome obstacles and enemies and win wars.